Ryan Ham here with another update on the R51. I'll be pretty quick about this, and then I'll go in and do another video on what you see in front of you, some of which is going to be featured in upcoming videos, and some of it maybe not. I don't know. All right, so there's been a couple of stories out on the R51 recently. As you know, from my previous video, they plan on anybody who wants their R51 replaced can send it in and get a new R51, and they give them a cool Pelican case and a couple of extra magazines, two extra magazines along with it. However, they don't think they're going to start doing that until October, and who knows, once they start production in October, that's an estimate. Who knows how well they're going to do at meeting those estimates. So I found this on ramworks.net, and I'll try to put the link down in the description. It might not appear right away, but it'll be there. And essentially, what it is kind of a defense of Remington, and I don't like it very much at all. I'll give you a quote. Most times, production guns come out like pre-production guns, though most often there are small issues fixed behind the scenes and consumers never hear about them. Less often, like with the R51, there are bigger problems. Sometimes, though less frequently, a company waits until they have working production samples before they tell the world. Some folks looked at Remington's mistake as nothing more than a way to get internet attention for themselves. No, I don't think they were doing that. One guy called those given a first look at the R51 liars and accused them of them and the magazines of being paid to tell those lies. Well, that's actually not a lie. That's true. They get paid. They're not necessarily liars. That's partially true, I'll say. They're not necessarily liars, but they were given polished guns and they were duped. At this point, they should come out and say, hey, we were duped just like you guys. We got good guns. These guns function. We did our reviews based on those. We'd never seen a production gun, which would be the truth. Instead of doing that, yeah. Uh, another bloviated. I don't know. These guys write, but who's ever used the word bloviated in a sentence? Ever? I just did because I'm quoting. Another of these writers bloviated that the reason the R51 received such positive initial reviews was because there were no real tactical, and he puts in dashes, tactard guys allowed to review it. Okay, well, so he's putting down half of the gun consumers out there, the ones that don't hunt or do anything, but they're into tactical shooting and they like guns that look cool. Ramworks.net. Read it, come to your own conclusion. Okay. The other article was a little more insightful. It's a blog, so take it for what it's worth. It's worth the paper that it is printed on the internet. Blogs.militarytimes. They basically say a whole bunch of stuff on here. They repeat what they said in a confidential document sent to Remington Outdoors Company employees earlier in the day and leaked to Gear Scout by a green-blooded source, somebody who works for Remington, I guess. The company's chief executive officer, George Kaliditides, whatever, Kaliditids, it'll be down in the description, took his share of the blame and offered employees that purchased an R51 the same remedy given to their customers, with the added inclusion of a written apology from whatever his name is himself. That's where the buck stops, he says. Okay, well, okay, the buck stops there. What I found more interesting, sure, he's taking responsibility. Yeah, why don't you tell the public? You told your employees, you put out this cryptic statement. Why don't you tell the public that it's wrong and recall it so that nobody gets hurt or nobody is in a situation where they have an R51 and they can't defend themselves? Okay, so this other part is a little more interesting. They're talking about the action. The historic action combines a hesitation-locked breach, non-tilting barrel, and integral safeties that combine to make it accurate, intuitive, blah, 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 blah. And they say it's based on the Remington Model 53. Well, there was no Remington Model 53. That's kind of a colloquial term that we use to describe what would have been the model of 1918 Navy sidearm, because the Navy had accepted it when World War I broke out. They were basically negotiating for production. Remington wanted a ton of money to produce it, to tool up for production, and the Navy was working with it. It was going to cost a lot more than just buying 1911s. When war broke out, money was scarce, and they didn't want to start a whole new arms program. So they just said, okay, Remington, you're going to produce the 1911, and Colt's going to tell you how. And that's what happened. Anyways, so they say it's based on the Model 53, and that AAC, Advanced Armament Corporation, had done the initial design on it. And then they say that the AAC and Remington were having shaky relationships with Freedom Group, and the head guy basically resigned. The head guy that was designing the R51 resigned. And then everybody was left to pick up the pieces, and they tried to, and they didn't do a real good job. So poof. Well, I'm not buying it, because this is a world-class company. They produce firearms, and they're not producing a reliable, safe firearm, and they're putting it out there and immediately stopping production, but not telling anybody about it. If this were a mainstream product like a Ford Focus or something like that, and engines were exploding left and right, and they brought it to MSNBC. MSNBC would do an expose, but since it's gun people, you know, screw us. All right. Well, that's enough ranting. You can stop the video here, or you could just watch me with what I'm doing here. Essentially, what I'm doing here is I'm swapping out the original grips on my Mark II, my new Mark II here, used Mark II, for Red Eagle grips. It's kind of hard to do around the camera, so if I look like I'm struggling, yeah, I am struggling, because it's kind of hard to do around the camera, but I thought I'd give you guys some gun stuff. Yeah, I didn't clear it first, but all my guns stay cleared at the safe, so it's clear. And put those out of the way. And you might see some other stuff that would interest you on the table, and we'll go into more of that later. There's pieces parts for two Marlin Camp carbines here. I like the Marlin Camp carbine. It's a neat gun. It's a really poor design, but a neat concept, and I'll go into that more into that in a second. Okay, tighten that one down. Tighten this one down. This gun here is eventually going to have. Okay, loosen this one so I can move the grip around and hit that hole. Is eventually going to have the barrel threaded. I just haven't sent it off to do it yet. So when I get the barrel threaded on there, I'm going to cut it down to roughly 4.5 inches, maybe 4 inches. I'm going to set the sight back, so the sight will be way back, and then it'll have a Silencer Co. profile to the front, so that I can install my Spectre 2. And I think the Mark II is a better fitting gun for my hand. We'll go into that later when I do videos on that. So if anybody doesn't know the story on the Red Eagle versus Black Eagle, initially Alexander Sturm and Bill Ruger started their company. Bill Ruger was the designer. His family had a little bit of history, and they were building drills, and he thought, well, there's a lot of parts and a lot of the process for making drills, like regular hand drills at the time, would also apply to making guns. So he had this neat idea for this gun, where you take sheet metal, and this is just 2 halves of sheet metal, and you fold it over and weld it, and it ends up being a really handy way of making a firearm. And so he didn't have the money to put into it, so a friend of his who I guess had some money, Alexander Sturm, footed the front of the money for the business. Well, the original grips were red with the silver, just like these. And what happened was Alexander Sturm died shortly after they started their venture. And this is all from memory, so if I get it wrong, just don't beat me up too much in the comments. He died shortly after they started their venture, and to memorialize that, Ruger changed all of the logos from black, from red to black, as if wearing a black armband. And he kept them that way for a while. So you see kind of the difference here between the old black and red, and that was kind of a memorial to his friend and partner Alexander Sturm. Well, I did get a whole bunch of base plates, so I've got all the red base plates somewhere, but this pistol doesn't have one yet. And you can change the base plates out and the grips out, and I think it just it's just a little more fitting for what I like to do. And yeah, eventually that'll have a suppressor on it. So let me finish up with that, and that should be it. I'm going to do another video shortly after this, and I'll post it probably in a day or so. And I'll do that video on my my start on repairing my Marlin Camp 9. So Ryan Ham. Sorry it went to 12 minutes, but you didn't have to watch the second half if you didn't want to. Goodbye.